I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off. I'm not trying to. I've seen this movie before, right? If you're going to put South Africa on blast, as they say where I come from, and ignore Qatar, not just ignore, sit there next to the Qatari Emir. Oh, this is the most important. Oh, we have to protect Qatar. Well, all of mind, we have to go. Okay, wait. Stop the truck. Stop the truck. Qatar is our closest best friend. They're about peace. They want peace all over the world. Those are lies. Qatar is one of the main sponsors of global terrorism today, along with Turkey, along with Iran. So when you sit there and ignore what Qatar did at the ICJ and then tell everybody how Qatar is, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's called compromise.
Over the past few years, we've watched America change in ways few people could have imagined. Anti-Semitism is rising. Israel has become one of the most polarizing issues in the world, and political leaders are saying things that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Today's guest believes none of this is happening by accident. He believes these stories are connected, and understanding why may be one of the most important conversations we can have right now. Pastor Dumisani Washington, welcome back to Stand Tall Israel.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Appreciate being here.
Pastor, I want to start with Zoran Mamdani. Is Zoran Mamdani the problem, or is he simply exposing what America has already become?
The latter. And not only is it the latter, but I go further. He's a harbinger. I mean, whatever people think about him, his policies, be it communism, socialism, support for Hamas, whatever. And then for the people who are listening to this, who you think those other things I just named are good things, you're probably watching the wrong podcast, but I'm glad you're here. But yeah, he's I don't want to be clear. I'm not understating the importance of the mayor of the largest, most significant city in the United States of America being a Hamas supporting anti-Semitic, and yes, I'll back all that up and everything, but he's also was partially groomed long before then as a leader of Students for Justice in Palestine in its college campuses, which I can riff on that all day long, right? So he is but a symptom of a much, much larger problem. I tell people, you think that's something, there's a queue. He's not even the most charismatic that they have. There's a long line going back to San Francisco, going back to LA, going back to Detroit. I mean, he's not even, that's a long answer to your question. Oh no, he's not and he's the beginning.
So what worries you more, Zoran Mamdani or the millions of Americans who believe that he's actually right? Like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would someone with Mamdani's views have been politically viable in New York? What exactly changed?
It would have been to a certain degree because this has been a slow death by poison. And for the people, I'm sure we'll, in our course of our conversation, Dan, you'll have some lighter moments, some light. We'll have to talk about darkness and all that kind of stuff. That's my favorite parts of the Psalm of Psalm 23. You know, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. But it doesn't end there, right? He keeps going, he keeps writing. So anyway, it's a combination of all those things, right? They started doing those polls several years ago, judging the young demographic. I remember exactly what the age was. People who thought socialism was good, because it has the word social. And again, I want to be very clear. I'm not mocking the young people. I've been saying this for years, and I often would kind of ruffle feathers as I'm doing this. If the adults in the room know that these kids have gone to these schools, these institutions of higher learning, and been so indoctrinated against America, against democracy, against a constitutional republic, for communism, for socialism, against Israel, because all these things are connected, ladies and gentlemen. It's a complete, total package that these kids are force-fed. If the kids are somehow silly, whatever the word we want to use, to actually have succumbed to it, what does that say about us as the adults who allowed it? I mean, we knew what they were walking into, right? This is nothing new. This has been going on for a long time. We can go back to the 60s and talk about the kind of the radicalism. I'm not talking about justice or talking about difficult issues. I'm talking about the whole burn it all down, right? You know, burn it all down, destroy everything, and everything is racist, everything is bad, everything is misogynist. I mean, no nuanced conversations about anything, just about everything. It was clearly, this was happening when you had people like former KGB spy Yuri Bezmenov defect here in the late 1970s And he's doing interviews up the wazoo about what's going on and how it's going on. Okay, that's been going on for a long time. At that point, as a society and as leaders, we asked for it, right? He's telling us what's going on, how it's been going on, what's happening, what needs to happen in terms of strengthening a patriotic America, strengthening the family, this, that, and the other. We didn't listen to him, right? I mean, the collective we, right? We didn't listen to him. So, yeah, by now, would Zoran Mamdani have been elected 5 years ago? Possibly not being as blatant as he was, but if he just couched it a little bit different. Okay, was anybody going to get elected as a mayor of New York talking about he's going to arrest the sitting prime minister of Israel? No, that was never going to happen, right? But it happened now, right? It sure did happen. He was very, very blatant about the fact that, that's how much his hatred for Israel. I don't really. Anyway, so yeah, this is what we're seeing now is both a culmination when it comes to Mamdani, but again, at the same time, it's also a foreshadowing. So yeah, someone with his views could have been elected several years ago. He just would have had to been more subtle about it, like Obama.
Yeah. Now, has anti-Zionism become the acceptable language through which anti-Semitism is expressed? Like Mamdani, for example, he knew that he can't arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu, but what's his goal over here?
To demonize Israel. So when you introduced our conversation here, one of the things you talked about how these things are connected. What has been the goal, and I always have to preface it by saying this, when like in my book, Zionism in the Black Church, and some of the materials that we produced, the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, when we're talking about the whole Palestine thing, the whole, the anti-Zionism part of it, I'm talking about now the political part of it that was embedded particularly in our academia. The goal was always, both by the Arab League and the Soviet Union, who combined forces like this, particularly in the 60s, particularly in the 60s, the goal was also always the demonization, the delegitimization of the Jewish state. And why? Well, for many obvious reasons. In other words, to want to try to destroy Israel, even if it could do from the inside, right? Maybe they could place people inside who would have these types of attitudes and mindsets where Israel or the Jewish state was concerned. But the initial reason was that Israel had the audacity to not lose the kinetic wars, right? 48, 56, 73, Yom Kippur, 67, of course, before that and everything. So each time the Arab powers, backed by the Soviet Union, felt, we have the Israelis now. This is it, right? This is why we talk about the 700,000 Arabs who were forced to flee. No, they were told to leave by the Arab leaders. And why? They said, we're going to wipe the floor with the Jews. And when we're done, you can come back, right? That was the whole point of them leaving and becoming refugees and never getting, any type of sanctuary or citizenship in the Syrias and the Lebanons, those type of things, right? So when Israel's enemies saw this is going to take a minute and we keep losing, if you want to add the religious aspect in there, their God keeps fighting for them, which is what Hamas said during Operation, not Protective Edge, whatever it was back in 2014. They said, how come you guys can't shoot for him? Well, their God fights for them. Hamas said this. The God fights for them, right? Okay. So when they realized that they're up against everything, including the elements, they said they doubled down on the propaganda using the United Nations, right? That's how you got Zionism as racism in 1975, using all kinds of other human rights organizations and infiltrating other governments to constantly demonize Israel, which, Daniel, as you and I know, the reason why many people, particularly if they're on social media, who don't know anything about the Israel-Arab conflict or the wars with Iran, they wholeheartedly believe that Israel not only is committing genocide, has been committing a genocide against the Arab Palestinians in Gaza for the past 20-something years, if you want to go back to when Israel withdrew from there. Why do they believe that? Because they've been told that by media and by their schools over and over and over again. It wasn't true then. It's still not true. They never committed a genocide, but people believe it.
Now, how do you think people came to this conclusion of Palestinians being the oppressed ones and the Israelis being the oppressors?
Yeah. So this was also planned. It's funny. I think it was an Israeli friend I had. He said, what did he say? He said about paranoia. He said, it's not paranoia if it's true. In other words, if everybody's actually out to get you, everybody's actually out to get you, right? Not everybody to a person, no, but you're talking about a global conspiracy, right? The problem was that, conspiracy theorists, the problem is that Israel is an example of a nation and a people who other organizations, institutions around the world have partnered to demonize, right? So how did the Arab Palestinian people become known as the victims? Well, it was several different things. One of those was that you did have what we would call legit refugees who fled their homes during the beginning of those Arab-Israeli wars. I mean, not just the beginning, I'm talking about the beginning of the Jewish state, its independence, who were legit then dispossessed of those homes in large part because they left. And if those areas were affected and everything, and then they were not given sanctuary again, citizenship from the Arab powers that actually told them to leave. Now, of course, Daniel, you and I know the story. 20% of Israel's population has always been Arab because the Arabs who stayed to be a part of a peaceful, pluralistic Israeli Jewish state, and they're to this day, well, they're still there now. Multi-generational. They're in the Knesset. They're in the law enforcement. They're all those things. They're in the military. They're doctors. They're lawyers. All of those things, right? So what happened was the Arabs came together again with the other powers like them to help create, ladies and gentlemen, a permanent refugee class. The Palestinians are the only people on the planet. I'm not saying this is their fault. I'm talking about what was done to them and the mindset that was given to them. The only people on the planet that for some 60 plus years have been considered refugees. The Palestinians are the only group of people who have a permanent department in the United Nations that acknowledges and pays money towards the refugee status. Now, that money goes to Hamas, that money goes to terrorism, right? But it ostensibly is supposed to help. I mean, you're talking about Arab Palestinian refugees who've been in San Jose for the last 50 years, who've been in Tallahassee, Florida, right? This was the goal of Yasser Arafat and the PLO, the Arab powers against Israel. And then, of course, it was very helpful to the Soviet Union, which is why they passed that whole resolution in 1975. Zionism is a form of racism. They knew that wasn't true, but they knew that if they could get that jargon, if they could get those placards, if they can actually get the mindset in terms of what was being alleged, again, it's the Joseph Goebbels thing. Just keep saying it over and over and over again. So to this day, people who don't even know anything about the conflict consider Arab Palestinian refugees to be this oppressed people by the Israeli government and by the United States by default, who are somehow living in shanty towns and everything. Now, some of the Palestinian refugee areas are rougher than areas, but we also know this, Daniel, some of those refugee areas, there's big old giant 4,000 square foot houses and $60,000 cars. Cost more than that in Israel, but Mercedes-Benz, where's all that money coming from, right? Are they tech billionaires or something? No, that's the money that's coming from the international community to help the Palestinian refugees. And those people are very wealthy. And Hamas, billionaires and millionaires. According to Forbes magazine about 2 or 3 years ago, Hamas was the second or third wealthiest terrorist organization on the planet behind ISIS. So where does that money come from? It comes from the perpetual refugee status of the Arab Palestinian people, and it goes to, among other things, fund terrorism.
So do the Arab countries, the Muslims in the other Arab countries, actually care about the Palestinians, or are they using the Palestinians as a tool for something else? Like the Islamic Republic of Iran would say that we're fighting for the Palestinians, for example. But do they actually care about the Palestinians? They don't even care about their own citizens of their own country.
One of the things I appreciate about the reporting, like Memory, like Middle East, something reporting, those types of things, is that they'll take the Arabic and then they'll translate it for you.
That's good.
And there's been countless, well, Jan, you've probably seen countless of leaders admitting that they never cared about the Palestinians. It was never about the Palestinians. It was always about destroying Israel, right? So in answer to your question, no, they don't. By and large, are there people in the Arab world who really care about what happens to Arab Palestinians? I'm sure there are, right? Is that the prevailing sentiment? No. I mean, they're treated, meaning Arab Palestinians, worse than second-class citizens when they do go to places like Egypt. Egypt, who, when after October 7th, this happened intermittently, but after October 7th, when Israel finally did begin to engage Hamas, we know Egypt, not just the border's already secure, right? They doubled down. They made the wall bigger. Why? They didn't want any people from Gaza coming into Egypt, right? Does that sound like people who are concerned about the Palestinians? No. You would give them rest, and they're being starved. They weren't being starved. And even if they were being starved in that sense, and the money, the food was being taken by Hamas, Egypt wasn't going to let them in. Turkey's not going to let them anywhere. It's taking them. There has always been one in which I call, from where I come from, we call those poverty pimps, meaning keep them in poverty And you, meaning the leaders of those people, like starting with Yasser Arafat, you get which is why he died with billions of dollars, right? His daughter is still spending the money that he stockpiled from the international community, duping everybody into thinking that he was going to take care of the Palestinians. It's been I hate to use this term because it's so overused, the grift. I mean, this has been one of the biggest farces perpetrated on the international community in modern history. Now, I want to say this very, very clearly. I'm not talking about Palestinians, Arab Palestinians who are victimized. Are many of them favorable to Hamas? Yes. Shoot. I mean, there was a Pew Research thing done in like 44% of American Muslims are favorable to Hamas, right? Is that the truth? Yes. Yes. But I'm not talking about the regular Arab Palestinian person setting up that system. I'm talking about the Arab powers and the international community, those leaders. They set up that system. They set up the system to exploit the Arab Palestinian people, which is why there's for the purpose of constantly demonizing Israel, so that if you're one of the Arab powers who's being a part of it, I'll give you this as an example. In 2020, was that the first year of the Abraham Accords? Was it Trump's last year? I think it was. The Abraham Accords was at 2008. My dates are messing up in my mind. When the Arab nations that signed on, the Moroccos, the UAEs, the Bahrains, when they did so, we remember that the people who were opposed in the Arab world accused the Bahrains and the UAEs of not caring about the Palestinians, right? How dare you make peace with the Jewish state, and how dare you do commerce with the Jewish state? And the response from those Arab nations who did sign on was essentially, Hamas are terrorists, or Hamas is exploiting, right? They said out loud what they knew for decades. They basically said, we are not abandoning the Arab Palestinian people, but we are moving forward because the real people who are perpetuating this are Hamas, is Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it's Iran, it's right. So, and it's amazing because although, and I'm one of those who applauded, it was a great, as long as there's peace, let's go forward. Hey, peace is always better than fighting, people not dying, let's have a thriving economy, all of those things. At the same time, it was not lost on me that what those Arab powers were saying then, they knew to be true in the 1960s. They knew to be true. They always knew that those refugees, those people, the ones who were truly poor or truly struggling, were being exploited by their own leaders.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think has done the most damage to the truth about Israel? Has it been politicians, universities, media, or social media? What
That one
in
is
your mind?
harder. There's so many people who contributed to it. I mean, what's important for me is historical context. We know kind of where the lies got started, everything from Stalin's anti-Zionist stuff from the late 1940s or 50s to what the PLO does, the KGB and all those things. But I think that by now, Daniel, allowing for the discussion around origin, I don't know if I could say evenly, but I have to say that for the sake of time, these different forces are equally culpable. This is one of the reasons why, for me, in the discussion of combating anti-Semitism here in the States, in terms of what's going on in our criminal justice system, in terms of how CARE, which is a civil rights group for Hamas, the kind of distortions that they do. Let's make a league with the black people. And we talk about our civil rights, and they don't care about civil rights. They're trying to kill Jews, right? Or you're talking about what's going on the college campuses, which to me has always been ground zero. Always been ground zero, because if you can indoctrinate your up and coming leaders and generation, you get what we're getting now, right? So I would, as an American and as a Christian pastor, for me, the most important culprit in this scenario would be our own political leaders and religious leaders, for those of us who've not been, shouting from the rooftops about these things happening, the injustices that have been taking place, among many other ones, how the whole Palestinian narrative will come in and exploit all kinds of things having nothing to do with justice. I'll give one example, do one anecdotal thing for now. I've said this for years, and for me, I'm repeating myself. For those who haven't heard me say it out loud, maybe your first time. When we consider the type of Hamas-affiliated organizations on our campuses, Students for Justice in Palestine, the Muslim Student Association, and the plethora of other Muslim Brotherhood organizations, both on our campuses and throughout our society. The amount of money that the Muslim Brotherhood and its affiliates give to our political candidates and everything, it's hard to make the case that we, as the American leaders in education and politics, are the most culpable, right? If it's a situation where we know that Qatar, by hands down the biggest funder of American education, both K through 12 and college, and then the Turkeys and the Saudi Arabias and others, Pakistan, right? We've known about these things for years. If we are allowing terrorist or terrorist adjacent organizations and governments to flood our campuses with billions of dollars, again, I want to be very clear. I told this story, I'll tell it again. About 12 years ago, 2014, 13 or so, I'm from California. I don't live in California anymore. There were several faculty members at San Francisco State University who were the very, very anti-Israel activists, saying, again, 2000s has been going on for a long time. Daniel, they literally, this is reported, all this is actual factual information, flew to the Middle East, went to Jordan, and sat down and met with leaders of the PFLP, the Popular Liberation Front for the Palestinian. That's it's a registered terrorist organization with our State Department, as is Hamas. Flew back to San Francisco and then continued their anti-Zionist activity on campus, anti-American activity as well. And then shortly after that, they began to host, they tried to do it physically, but they couldn't at that time. But Layla Khaled, who was an actual, she was the helped hijack complainant. Again, my point of that story, and other things like that, other terrorists, other people, other Israel haters. Here's my point. In the real world of grown-ups, those professors should have been indicted. They took university funds, and even if they didn't take university funds, as professors, flew to Jordan and met face-to-face with terrorists. That right there should have gotten them stopped at the border when and if they were allowed to fly back home. Nothing ever happened to them. And what's my point? That's been going on for years. And our leaders are well aware of it. By the time they're pointing fingers at all those bad students for justice in Palestine, those kids say, yeah, no, they could be mean and nasty. Absolutely. Here's my point. Why are they on the campus? Under what guidelines would student chapters of the KKK be allowed to be on campuses around the country? Yet, KKK, which is a terrorist organization, yet groups that are affiliated with Hamas are okay, and they have been for years. Daniel, we have largely done it to ourselves. And what's one of the results? Zohran Mamdani. He basically was a organizer for Students for Justice in Palestine. And his political career has been navigated by lots of different forces. And I've been watching these different articles, people saying, they've been sending them to me, oh, there's been some shenanigans there with the voting and this, that, and the other. And there might be proof of this, that. I don't know if there is or not. I'm not in New York. I don't do the tallying and anything like that. That might very well be the case. But here's my thing, ladies and gentlemen. Even if there was a certain amount of shenanigans or whatever like that, let's just say he stole it. I'm not saying he stole it, but say he stole it. Let's say somehow they did all these different votes. Here's my thing. He became one of the most popular politicians in all of New York before the election. He had rock star treatment and going to concerts and all these different things like that. So even before the election happened, and the black working class was not feeling him at all during the primaries, ladies and gentlemen, he got almost none of the black working class vote, but that's another conversation we're going to have. He then takes on and comes, and his popularity is actually increasing, right? So my question then becomes, how did we as the American people, leaders, allow there to be such a system in our colleges and universities in which there are affiliated groups with terrorist organizations that they're allowed to do whatever they want to do with no repercussions? Why is there something legally not happening to shut those organizations down? And that's what my issue has been for many years now.
Now, you spent decades trying to rebuild the relationship between Black Americans and Jewish Americans. Why are there people that are working just as hard to tear it apart? And who benefits when those two communities stop trusting each other?
The synergy between the Black and American and Jewish American community it's unparalleled, right? You can go back NAACP, Booker T. Washington, Julius Rosenwald School, Civil Rights Community. I mean, our communities would come together for the benefit of each other, but also for the benefit of the world, right? Did we always get everything right? No, people are flawed. Sometimes this could have been done differently, that could have been done differently. But when you talk about the synergy from a Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, which produced some 5,400 schools throughout the segregated South for kids who did not have places to go, and then the also the Rosenwald fellowships and these types of things, and what it set the stage, how it helped even the Harlem Renaissance, these types of things. You have a synergy that has impacted the world. So you have that alliance that's there that has meant very much positive for lots of different people. And then also a certain amount of goodwill and sensitivity towards each other because our stories are so parallel. We've gone through some of the exact same things for a very, very long time. And well, very logically thinking, if you are a hater of either or both of those communities, one of the first things you need to do is destroy that synergy. You gotta somehow, if it is true that we're, another term that gets used all the time, stronger together, you gotta break that up, which ironically was Stalin's goal. His whole thing was that at the end of the Second World War, United States is a world power and NATO has now been formed. Stalin says he can't. There's General Pasep, I wrote about this in his book, Disinformation. Said, I can't beat these. There's no way. There's no way Russia, the Soviet Union, is going to be able to take on the United States and Germany and all these other states that have now come together, NATO. So he decides, I need to break them apart. And what does he decide? Anti-Semitism, one of his main things. He starts calling the Senate and the Congress, controlled by the Jews, all the stuff, all the, what they call the groypers on the left and the right. Stalin was saying that stuff back in the late 40s or 1950s. So again, what was the point? He had to destroy that synergy and hopefully place enough of a poison within Western society, particularly the United States, to fray it, which is fast forward where we are now. That was the same approach where the Black and Jewish community was concerned. Also, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said before, the oldest international relationship that Israel has is when 3,000 years, when the Queen of Sheba left Ethiopia and visited Solomon in Jerusalem. Yes, 3,000 people. It's so funny, Daniel. Oh, Dumisani, that wasn't Ethiopia, that was Yemen. If you know your map and your geography, what the Bible calls Cush is that entire region. That's another conversation for another day, right? My point being, she came from Africa. You can call it Yemen, you can call it whatever. There was no separate Yemen state 3,000 years ago, but that's okay, right? So what you had was this synergy that's talked about. And even for Christians, Jesus talks about that visit. He talks about in the book of Matthew. He said, the Queen of the South to rise up at the judgment. She came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Now, you have 1,000 years later, Jesus is even talking about it. And now the church has been talking about it, not as much lately, although our organizations have been bringing it back to the forefront. And why am I bringing that up? You're talking about a synergy. When the Queen of Sheba was there, she told Solomon, God loves Israel forever. That's why he's made you king. It was the equivalent of, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. And to this day, Israel's most ardent supporters are not just Christian Zionists, sub-Saharan African Christian Zionists. They are the most passionately lovers of Israel, lovers of the Jewish people. Here they are, many of them struggling with their own things. They want to make pilgrimage. They want to go, the Holy Land is the Holy Land. That whole nonsense about Jesus being a Palestinian, all kind of that stuff is completely foreign to them, right? So that synergy is real. Why do I point that out, ladies and gentlemen? Well, after those wars, particularly of 67 and 73, and the Arabs against Israel, what do? They kept trying to intimidate the African states to sever their very close ties with Israel. Golda Meir, the first foreign minister there to Africa, had done much work. That's where, what's it called again? Mashah comes from. It comes from her work. And why was it so effective? Well, her mindset, and she even said it, we weren't a very wealthy place, but we did have knowledge to share. And we were having to relearn things as an independent nation, just as they were. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel gets its independence in 1947, 48. The first sub-Saharan African nation, 1957. Colonialism and European imperialism is now beginning to recede around the entire region. Israel says to Africa, let's go. Do we need your help? Yeah, we need your help in the United Nations. All those things she said. But at the same time, we also have this mindset. We know that if we work together, we can accomplish anything. Israel's enemies have always known that, which is why to this day, they focus on, among other things, Israel's relationship with Africa, and the Jewish and Black synergy in the United States. It's always been a part and parcel. They've always been connected, everyone.
Is that why support for Israel has been framed or reframed as somewhat inconsistent with the civil rights movement?
Yes, reframe, absolutely. So glad you said that, because again, during the civil rights movement, particularly at its zenith in the 1960s, Zionism was wholeheartedly supported by the establishment civil rights leaders. And I say it that way, not in a negative way. The Dr. Kings, the Bayard Rustin, the A. Philip Randolphs, the Ralph Abernathy's, the Andrew Youngs. Bayard Rustin in 1975, Dr. King's one of his main advisors and one of the architects of the March on Washington, formed an organization called BASIC, Black Americans to Support Israel Committee. And they took out a full page ad in the 1975 November edition of the New York Times. And we have copies of it now. I mean, you can go on our website, ibsi.org, click on documents. You'll see it right there. 200 of the who's who signed that paper, signed that ad that they actually took out. And they listed 7 reasons as to why the Black community stood with Israel and stood for peace. And those people who signed it included opera star Leontine Price, LA Dodger great Roy Campanella, Count Basie, Mrs. Medgar Evers, the civil rights icon's wife. Coretta Scott King was a part of it. Daddy King, or Dr. King's father was. I mean, the who's who of the Black community: education, entertainment, you name it, right? Business, everything. And it wasn't considered a weird thing. The reason why Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph felt to galvanize in that way is because, to your point, more and more Israel haters and the propagandists were attempting to make Israel a white settler colonizing, occupying force, and then contrast that with anything that has to do with civil rights or justice movements. It hadn't taken hold yet, but it was gaining traction. Again, the PLO, which is a propaganda arm, was started in 1964. Arafat becomes the chairman in 1969. And as I've said before, the strategy was clear. You would see him with photo ops with any Black leader of note: Nelson Mandela, Louis Farrakhan, Jesse Jackson. Why? Why was he always seen smiling like Cheshire Cat with those individuals? Why? Because the plan was to stand next to people who, at the very least, represent a struggle for justice, regardless of what you think about those individuals, right? And individually, as a person, I'm talking about as this collective mindset is what he's doing. Eldridge Cleaver of the Black Panthers, why all these photo ops, Angela Davis, and on and on and on. He gained traction mostly with the younger groups, like the Angela Davises, like the Stokely Carmichaels and everything. But the goal was to associate the From the River to the Sea genocide call with a true call for true justice. It was in its nascent stages there. Did it work? I'm asking, I know you're the interviewer, I'm sorry. It 100% worked, which is why after October 7th, you had kids, most of whom were not Black, ladies and gentlemen. It was not the HBCUs that were on fire after October 7th. And the protesting of Israel, who hadn't even done anything, they hadn't even responded to Hamas yet. You still had Hamas terrorists there in Israel, right? It was Harvard, it was Columbia, it was UCLA, it was Michigan, it was Yale, it was those schools where the Black population is less than 2%, right? So the goal was exploit the Black community to make people think this, and then 60 years later, bam, you get what you have now. What you have right now is young kids, again, couldn't find Gaza on a map, could give them a GPS and an actual physical map. They have no idea what river, what sea, but they think they're on the right side of history. They could be an LGBTQ club on campus and they'll say, we stand with Palestine, right? That's how much they've been duped, knowing full well, you and I know, that they would be killed within a minute being who they were in Gaza City, in Ramallah, right? But no, Israel is the one that's oppressing. That was planted in the 60s. My community was used the most to try to exploit to do that, and it worked like a charm. Again, the focus wasn't my community. The focus was using my community.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've recently posted about Nigeria and Sudan. Why do massacres of Christians rarely become global movements like Free Palestine and, Gaza?
people have to understand both the psychological and the spiritual impact of what we're actually talking about here. Here's the part, Daniel, where we have I don't know if you're a rabbi or not, but obviously I know you're Jewish and Torah, and now we have to have an actual religious conversation for a moment. Because there's a psychological part, right? There's the duping, there's the whole mass formation, and there's the lies and all those things. But ladies and gentlemen, those of us who tend to try to think both scripturally and spiritually, recognize that there's a spiritual effect of that as well. There's a moral decay. One of the things that we've told, particularly Black audiences, as we've had the work of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel for years, is that the more Black leaders were more sensitive to or leaning towards the Palestinian false narrative, the less they were concerned about the Black community and what was going on in Africa. Remember I told you about Barry Rustin? He started BASIC back in 1975. In the many articles that he wrote about this subject, he himself pointed out what was going on with Sudanese Christians in Sudan. How back for decades, in the 70s, they're being slaughtered by Sudanese Muslims, taken as slaves, the whole thing, right? So he was talking about it, comparing and contrasting how the United Nations was then demonizing Israel, and it was completely untrue what it was saying. But, oh, by the way, Syria and Sudan, and this was always, those places were on fire already, ladies and gentlemen. This was always going on for long. We talk about the prophetic voice. So part of the reason why, Daniel, you'll have, whether it's the Christian community and others, unconcerned with, not just unaware. You can say, they'll say Israel's doing this in Lebanon, Israel's doing this in Gaza. They'll have all their facts wrong. They won't even mention Hamas, right? They don't mention Hezbollah. Israel's just wantingly blah, blah, blah with innocent people. None of that is true. But not only did you explain to them that what you're saying is not true, you said, oh, okay, wow, you're really concerned about the human condition. You're really concerned about things like, genocide and starvation and everything. Can we talk about Syria? No. Sudan? No. Libya? No, I don't. Those things, and they couldn't even tell you why. They'll say, Israel, we need to, you've heard this. The evil in the world is because of Israel. And if we can just dismantle the Zionist project, everything will be better. No joke, they say those types of things. If we just get the Jews, right? That's not just psychological, ladies and gentlemen. That's spiritual. That's an actual spirit. This is why when the Bible describes the mindset of Israel's enemies, like in Psalm 83, it's also describing the mindset of God's enemies. The Bible's very clear that those who hate Israel hate God. Now, I can hear people like having a conniption fit right now. They'll do that thing. Are you saying that that God is Bibi Netanyahu? Nope, that's a complete distortion of what I'm actually saying. And I ain't talking negative about Bibi Netanyahu. I'm saying that God's eternal covenant with Israel is just that ironclad. And then when it comes to spiritual warfare, the dark forces understand that, and their attempts to destroy Israel, which goes back thousands of years, ladies and gentlemen, are an attempt to somehow harm or, crazily, destroy God. That's why I point to Psalm 83 is not the only one, but it's one of my favorite ones. When he says they're coming against your precious ones, God, they want to destroy you. That's the case. So Daniel, as a society, is pulled into that type of Jew hatred, which is always a bad sign for that society. Other atrocities don't matter. As a matter of fact, not only that matter, but it's Israel's fault. Yeah, somehow the slavery in Libya, Israel, right? The genocide in Sudan, Israel. And people do that. That's because the Israelis support the RSF, fill in the blank, right? No receipts for any of those types of things other than Al Jazeera talking crazy, right? But that's how it happens. Someone was saying that once that spirit has set in, it doesn't matter how far-fetched the claim is, right? That Israelis are really Martians who came in to dominate us, and this is the world of worlds. Oh, yeah, I heard that too, right? They really have antlers and everything and antennas, and oh, yeah, I heard that too. It doesn't matter what you say. Once that spirit, that dark spirit has descended far enough into that person's heart or into that community, you can make up anything, and the Jews did it. That's the danger of where we're actually headed in our society.
Now, one thing that you're known for is that you don't take sides. You're able to criticize both Democrats and Republicans equally. Recently, you've spoken about J.D. Vance kind of being the puppet of President Trump. President Trump, I guess, pitting Vance against Rubio and all that stuff. What do you have to say about that and what's going on with JD Vance?
JD Vance has now, for a while now, I don't know his whole career, but the last couple of years, since they've been in office, and including his time with TPUSA, it's very, very clear that he has an anti-Israel bias, at the very least, right? We posted some of their clips with TPUSA, and the kids get up talking about, Israel's, doing this and duping the people and everything. He doesn't push back on any of that stuff, right? Oh, yeah, Israel's a problem. Yeah, there's a disinformation. He didn't use the word disinformation. There's an influence thing, but it's always directed at Israel, right? It's not so much Qatar and Turkey, but it's Israel. And that's been happening particularly with the war with Iran, right? And the point that we have made, both me and our organization, is in a very, very logical way. President Trump is the president. He's JD Vance's boss. I misspoke a couple weeks ago and I said, well, he serves at the pleasure of. No, that'd be like a Secretary of State. The Secretary of State can be fired. The president can't fire the vice president. However, he's been silent. And then people explain to me, oh, that's because he's got a plan. I said, you know what? We've all known Donald Trump for decades. When has he ever been silent about anything that grates him, right? So the reason why we lay these things at Donald Trump's feet, the president, two main reasons. There's lots more than two reasons. Number one, if he had a problem with the things that JD Vance was saying, he would say it. Now, for those who push back against me and say, you're wrong, Pastor Dumisani, you have the right to be wrong. And I grant you the right. So President Trump is all of a sudden, he's become a wallflower. All of a sudden, he's become very, very quiet, very, very subtle. And so he vehemently disagrees with JD Vance, but he's just not saying anything right now. Like, for example, quick example, President Trump accused Israel recklessly going into Lebanon, knocking down apartment buildings. And then he sat there, you can call it tongue in cheek if you want to, sitting next to the Qatari emir and saying that maybe we need to let Syria handle it. Oh, Pastor Dumisani, that was a plan. That was okay. Whatever you thought that it was, it became a talking point. Al Jazeera started saying it. Pierce Morgan, they all started repeating the talking point that now Israel's committing genocide in Lebanon. President Trump didn't say genocide. He was just saying that they were being careless, reckless by killing. He was inferring that they're killing civilians. JD Vance says the same thing about 48 hours later. And then the people who are afraid to say that it's Trump, they go, oh, Vance, I don't believe. How dare he? And I was like, but Trump said the exact same thing. Oh, you have to understand this 4D chess, Pastor Dumisani. Okay, see that. I know a cult when I see one. I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off. I'm not trying to. I know, I've seen this movie before, right? I've seen the movie before when you can't tell the truth because of whatever your ties politically are. That's what we're saying. That's the first thing. But the other thing, Daniel, since you've asked me, I'm so glad you asked me a question. If it looks like compromise, smells like compromise, walks and talks like compromise, I can give lots of examples, but I want to give just one. The Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel has what's called the Africa-Israel Weekly. That's our Substack. So Africa-Israel Weekly. Again, I'm using this as an example. I have many more, and I could list a bunch of them, but I want to actually illustrate something here. About a year ago, the president hosted Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, in the Oval Office. It was filmed. You had all the press there. Had those photo ops and everything. And in that meeting, he addressed Cyril Ramaphosa on the killing of white farmers, what was actually the unrest that's going on in South Africa. And he brought up the receipts, had different pictures and everything like that. It was a big controversy and everything. Well, that was the culmination of what had already been stated that President Trump was going to do where the ANC, the African National Congress, was concerned, not just the issue with white farmers, white landowners, but with the ANC taking Israel to the International Criminal Court of Justice. They accused Israel of apartheid or genocide, filed that court case with the ICJ, which never ruled in their favor, by the way. That we have a whole article. You go on our thing, Africa Israel Weekly, you'll see different articles that we wrote about it. And the Trump administration announced that they were going to sanction South Africa for its role in the ICJ case, as well as other things, human rights violations. Of course, those of us who are aware of that case know that it was Iran and Qatar that funded it, that supported it, that promoted it, that actually scripted it. They just basically did it themselves in Tehran and Doha, and they took the money that they gave. ISGAP, Charles Asher Small's organization, did a wonderful job kind of laying these different things out, all the different evidences that were there that much money changed hands in order for South Africa than to take them to the ICJ. Why am I telling all that story? Trump made a lot of noise about South Africa's role. To this day, has said nothing about Qatar's or Iran's role, right? But particularly Qatar, right? Ladies and gentlemen, our article that we wrote after that was compromised, right? And people got very upset. How dare you? If you're defending Israel, your ally in this international tribunal, and you are actually now going to make the people pay who've actually brought the case, and you single out the puppet, because not only does South Africa, I'm not absolving, in the article you read it, we said basically the ANC unfortunately has led their people astray, and if the United States is going to sanction them, fine, do what they need to do because of what they stepped into. But in the, like you said, in the effort of fairness and justice, we're saying if you're going to put South Africa on blast, as they say where I come from, and ignore Qatar, not just ignore, sit there next to the Qatar Emir, oh, this is the most important. Oh, we have to protect Qatar. Well, of our mind, we have to go, okay, wait, stop the truck. I could kind of maybe try to wrap my head around the fact that you're sanctioning South Africa, but oh, Qatar has all this money, that and the other, but your continued confessions that Qatar is our closest best friend, they're peace, they want peace all over the world, those are lies. Qatar is one of the main sponsors of global terrorism today, along with Turkey, along with Iran. So when you sit there and ignore what Qatar did at the ICJ and then tell everybody how Qatar is, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's called compromise. And you call it, and then after that, fly around a $400 million plane from, come on, you guys. I said this before. People get upset with me. Okay, could you imagine what some of these same people would have said had Obama gotten a $400 million plane from Turkey? And people, they lose their stuff. Oh my God, Pastor Dumisani, how dare you compare? I was like, all that virtue signaling. When you get done hyperventilating, answer my question. What would those people have said? Now, for me, because I don't mind speaking to the power, I would have called it out then too. Yep. I would have called it the Muslim Brotherhood plane like I'm calling it now, right? But somehow, because of 40 chess and the multi-billion-dollar deal, oh, because a businessman, I'm going, wow. Well, I think about Isaiah chapter 1. Is that verse 23? Your princes are thieves. Your rulers are robbers. No one pleased the cause of the widow. I'm not saying that he doesn't do good things. Oh, Pastor Dumisani, they'll say, what about all the good things? See, like Obama, when I felt there was something good, I applauded. Unfortunately, that didn't happen a whole lot. Trump's first term, I applauded a lot, right? I was cool with the HBCU funding, right? I was cool with the lowest Black unemployment rate since in the history of record. I was all that, and people who didn't like Trump got mad at me. I don't care. I'm a grown man. I don't care. I didn't care, right? I was cool with the not just the Abraham Accords, Daniel, the recognition of the Golan Heights, right? The Taylor Force Act 2018. These are unprecedented. They were long overdue. Trump finally did it, right? So I was there. Hey, all right, cool, good job, right? So the people come, oh, you're just grifting. Oh, so now I just decided willy-nilly in his second term to just flip on all of that, right? No, I'm actually calling out what's going on. I use that ICJ thing just as one example. I can go on and on and on. Why would you make a board of peace and put on that thing China and Qatar and Turkey? Turkey, who has troops in Lebanon and is vying to put his troops in Gaza, and you're sitting there acting like you're going to think about it? You're going to actually consider openly selling F-35s to Erdogan, he's just the Sunni version of the Ayatollahs, ladies and gentlemen. There's not much different. He too wants to destroy Israel. He just the other day said we should invade Jerusalem. Daniel, am I lying? We should go and occupy Jerusalem, right? So, but he's a NATO member. Asking me sign up. I'm going, I can't. See the idiocy on the left or the right. I just can't, right? So you're explaining to me that Erdogan should have every right to condemn Israel as a Jewish state and want to march on Jerusalem because he's a member of NATO, right? That's what I'm talking about, right? When I see that type of inconsistency, yeah, I get loud because this is where the injustices come. I believe, Daniel, I don't know what the Torah portion is this week. Is it around 16 when he said justice and only justice shall you follow? I was telling that to somebody. I don't know exactly where we are. But if I'm not mistaken, I may be out for a week. This is the one in which Moses says to the children of Israel, by the hand of God, justice and only justice you shall follow. You won't have one Torah for the poor and no one for the, or Pastor Dumisani, we're not Jews. It's the same. Our justice system, ladies and gentlemen, in the Western world is based on the Torah. It's based on the word of God. There's a reason why the Ten Commandments sits in some of our halls in that way. Why? Because we recognize that's where our morality comes from. And God says he hates unjust measurements. If all of that is true, placating Qatar and Turkey and Pakistan, are you kidding me? Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan are the ones facilitating the nuclear talks with Iran. I mean, can you say that the foxes and the hen? Are you serious right now? Again, if Obama had established a board of peace and placed prominently Qatar and Turkey and Pakistan and had them negotiate his Iran nuclear deal, they'd still be having commission fits right now. But somehow, this is okay because Trump. So yes, I've been very vehement about these types of things. Why? Not because it's Trump. I don't have some sort of axe to grind. I don't care that he's white. I don't care that he's Republican. None of those things mean anything. Just like when Obama was a black and a Democrat, I didn't care. And that's part of where we are right now. The types of things that are being allowed because of identity politics. My friends on the right thought that identity politics was a left thing. They're finding out, oh, no. Everybody has the team they want to play for. Everybody has their team that they root for. And if you're not honest with yourself, you'll make up all kinds of excuses as to why your guy gets to do such and such, but this guy needs to go to jail. It's amazing what's happening right now, and it's only going to get worse. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question anywhere in there. Sorry.
Oh, you definitely did. And I thank you for speaking the truth, no matter who you're speaking about. You know, that's the way I think God wants us to be.
Daniel, I can tell you this real quick. When it started, I'll interject this. Around the spring is when I began to February, March of last year, when I started seeing what I saw just really quickly. And then my engagements went down on social media, right? For all the other anti-Israel stuff, no, my engagement was down. And then certain folks wouldn't talk to me, and that, which I didn't really. I'm an introvert, so if you're not talking to me, it really doesn't do anything to me. But my thing was that someone even said to me on social media, they were really mad at me. Your engagement is going down. I said, it's funny how you think that's supposed to be an impetus for me to post something differently. That's how brainwashed you are. Oh wow, they're not sharing my content anymore. I better say, I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't make. I'm not saying it to be provocative. I'm not saying it for clicks. I post stuff as I feel to post it, like the work that we do, the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. 70% of what we do is never online because it can't really be talked about publicly because we go to different countries and we work on different projects and stuff that everybody doesn't need to know about publicly in that way. The people who need to know are the people who are doing it. But the stuff I post is what I feel to post. It has nothing to do with whether or not I think people go, oh, when I post this, they're really going to love this. I really don't. I just posted something just a little while ago. I'm sure people are kind of pissed off, but I wasn't trying to piss people off. I was being real. But go ahead. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Many people spend their time talking about problems, yet you've chosen to invest in solutions. Tell us about the Unfinished Business Tour. Why does this matter? Why was completing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision so important to you personally?
Of the many things that were happening during the height of the civil rights movement and the Black Jewish synergy and all of the tumultuous time in our nation, right? The Vietnam War and all the type of things. One of the things that was very, very clear is that for the Black communities, Black leaders, fighting anti-Semitism and standing with Israel was a very, very crucial issue. These were crucial issues. They saw it not just as this, kind of, camaraderie in terms of what the Jewish community, but they saw it they saw it for what it was. It was an international threat for the world to begin to condemn Israel for existing, right? It was going to set a precedent. Like I said, there was Black prophetic voices that actually spoke out about these things. So in November of 1967, Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was planning on taking 5,000 African Americans to a Holy Land pilgrimage. We know it because there are letters that are being written between himself and then former Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, as well as Levi Eshkol, I believe, was the prime minister at the time. So they're writing back and forth in the excitement, and those letters date back to January and February of 1967. So all excited and everything, and Ben-Gurion said, "I want to congratulate you. You're going to revive the tradition of making pilgrimage to the Holy Land." He's not for Black people, just in general. There were no mass pilgrimages happening in the Holy Land, Daniel, in 1960. Surprise, surprise, right? Not to mention the fact that, ladies and gentlemen, in 1967, Israel didn't have access to Judea and Samaria. They didn't even have access to Jerusalem. But Dr. King was going to go to they called the Holy Lands of Israel and Jordan, right? They're going to go to the parts where they go to Jordan and say, well, of course, 1967 in June, the Six-Day War, the air powers, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, all the usual suspects, again, attacked the Jewish state. Israel wins that war miraculously. But there's a lot of political fallout, mainly because of the propaganda, right? There was no social media then, Daniel, but the propaganda machine was already going, right? And Israel, they said Israel started the war. It's so funny, right? The most effective lies are the ones that have a mixture of truth. Yes, Israel preemptively struck Egypt's air force, but only because Egypt had put how many troops on the border, and they had announced it. These guys got stinking drunk, ladies and gentlemen. This is all documented the night before, toasting themselves to defeating the Jews and driving them into the sea. So Israel just wasn't going to sit there, right? And let that happen. They decided to go and let's punch the bully in the mouth first. And what usually happens when he realizes that you're here to put, so that's what happened, right? So anyway, there's a lot of fallout. Dr. King, because of all the fallout, he decides to postpone the trip till the next year. Of course, the next year, April the 4th, 1968, he was assassinated. And the trip never happened. Who knows how history would have been rewritten had thousands of Black Americans began making pilgrimage to Israel in the late 1960s. By the way, I was born in 1967. The year they were going to go was the year I was born. So what my colleagues and I, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, I wrote about this in my book. This is something we've been aware of for a long time, right? And it's documented. Again, it's not common knowledge, even within pro-Israel circles, because it's something that's like many other things that get taught, like basic. Most people don't know about basic, right? Many people don't know about this planned trip. There's gonna be music. I think Mahalia Jackson was going, one of the most famous gospel singers at the time. It's gonna be a whole fanfare. And Dr. King says, for good, for brotherly love and everything like that. Okay. So our colleagues and I, we began to talk more about it and say, you know what? We need to do this. We're not speaking for Dr. King. We're not speaking for the King family. We don't consider ourselves, we've got some sort of mantle, and that we are Black Americans who stand with Israel, who respect what came before us and those other Black American leaders who very, very articulately stood with Israel. They explained why it was so important. They didn't condemn the Arab population, but they also did not consign Israel to some sort of river to the sea type of thing. So we said, we want to do this. We feel the need to do this. So we began to organize. And so the shorter version of a long story, we have launched what my colleague, Dr. Michael Stevens, called the Unfinished Business Holy Land Tour. We are taking 500 Black American and African pastors and Christian ministry leaders to the Holy Land, November the 4th, the 11th, the same month. It would have been the 59th anniversary of Dr. King's planned trip. And God say the same. Our plan is to, on the 60th anniversary, November of 2027, take 5,000. Our goal is to take 5,000 Black American pastors, multi-generational, the young ministers in their 20s, the pastor emeritus in their 80s plus, and bring them, husbands and wives together, different influencers and everything. This is the goal. It is happening now. As a matter of fact, Daniel, today's the 28th, so I don't know when this is going to, it's the 29th of July, whenever this actually it's posted. Yesterday was only 3 weeks. The 28th of July was the third week that the word of mouth about the trip had actually happened. And of the 500 seats, over 300 of them have already been registered for. We haven't even done some of the things that I'm doing. Like, Daniel, you're only the second podcast that I've been on to talk about it. Our friend Tinashe Peter, I was with him yesterday, the day before. I'm not sure when that's going to post. And now we're supposed to go down to Dallas where my good friend Eric Steckelbeck tonight, and the whole council. And it's called, I'm sorry, I didn't say this part. You can splice however you need to splice it. Our organization joined in with others, and we've helped form what's called the Black Christian Leadership Council on Israel Relations. Black Christian Leadership Council on Israel Relations. Myself, Dr. Michael Stevens, Pastor Reginald Gibson, Dr. Brandy Gibson, my wife, Pastor Valerie Washington, and Pastor Roger Cheeks. 6 of us. There will be others, but we've come together as Black American kind of elders in this space, right? From us in our 60s up to our 80s. And we've been doing this for a while. Not that we think we're all smart, but it was a Hineni moment for us, Daniel, and for those who, other than my Jewish friends, it was us, like Isaiah saying, "Here am I," right? We weren't saying we're big and bad and we're the ones, we're saying, okay, something needs to happen. We know that the vast majority of Black Americans stand with Israel, but they often don't feel like they have an outlet. They don't have a voice. They oftentimes feel somewhat ostracized by some of the other types of efforts that happen for many different reasons, some of them cultural, some of them others. And we said, okay, but we need to galvanize, not in some sort of racist, segregated, we don't want people around us, but no, we need to, within our community, help raise these voices. And the people that I have the job right now, because we haven't brought in all the staff, it's still new. So I'm doing most of the things. I'm sorting through all the different, registrations and everything. And one of the things we do, Daniel, haven't said this publicly yet, and won't reveal any people, they have to, after they give us the information, they write like a 100 to 250 little short essay as to why they want to go. Daniel, if the people could see the number of people who say the Jewish people need us to stand, not need us to stand with them, but we need to stand with the Jewish people. I'm concerned with the level of anti-Semitism. I want to go to the Holy Land. I want to walk where Jesus walked. I want to see that and the other. And I'm watching the anti-Semitism. The number of unprompted, we didn't tell them what to say, the unprompted responses. They know it's a Dr. King tour. They clicked on a little video. People can see it and you can share it if you want on the thing. It's about a minute long and Dr. Stevens is there in the Holy Land. But the number of Black Americans and Africans who are saying, I want to go be a part of history. I want to stand in solidarity with the Jewish people. People would be blown away. We're not blown away because we know that that's true. But our goal, by the grace of God, is to make that more prominent here in the public space.
Wow. Very, very inspiring. Obviously, you've been to Israel many, many times. But what do you hope that every pastor that experiences, what do you hope that they experience when they step off the plane in Israel and during this trip?
My hope is always, Daniel, that they have a tremendous experience, because Israel speaks for itself, with the land and the people, and not necessarily in that order, right? You can flip them around. I want them. One of the things I served for 7 years as the outreach coordinator, as the diversity outreach coordinator for Christians United for Israel under Pastor John Hagee. He and First Lady Diana Hagee, wonderful people, built a wonderful organization. I served. I left in 2021 to return to IBSI. The reason I bring him up is because one of the things of the many things that impressed me with how Dr. Hagee would approach it, his mindset, he and First Lady, that it was very, very important that Christians come to the land and experience the land, the Sea of Galilee and Jerusalem and, City of David and all those things, but they connect with the people. Because it's possible for a Christian to make pilgrimage to the Holy Land and want to have nothing to do with the Jewish people for whom that is their home. Right? So we would do things like, what was that? The Shabbat, what's that called? I can't remember the name of it now. There's actual something Shabbat. It's escaping me right now, where we would be hosted for Shabbat dinner in someone's home in Jerusalem, right? Maybe a rabbi, maybe just a Jewish leader, maybe not necessarily a religious Jewish leader in that sense of being a cleric or in clergy. But we would be hosted there, and then they would walk us through a very traditional, the singing of Psalm 30, Proverbs 31, that type, the lighting of the candles, all of those things. And I can tell you, Dr. Stevens and my other colleagues as well, for many Black pastors that we brought to Israel, that was one of the most, and not just enjoyable, it was one of the highlights of their whole thing. Oh, they got baptized in the Jordan River. They went to the Garden Tomb when Jesus rose, and all of these things. And one of the things that's top on their list, the top 2 or 3 things, was when they went to that Jewish person's home for Shabbat. So Daniel, my hope is always that I'll say it again, Israel speaks for itself. There's difficulties, there's challenges and all those things. But the Israeli people, they're just an amazing people, right? The picture of seeing Jews from literally all over the world who've made Aliyah over the decades, right? Along with the Jews who've been there since the Roman destroyed the temple in 70 AD, right? It's an amazing thing to see. I love seeing that. I love, Black folks come to Israel, they see Black folks who look like them, but they're Jews. My Asian friends, because I've taken a multi-ethnic, I'll never forget, I'll tell this quick story. One of my colleagues was a Chinese gentleman from the Bay Area. We worked together, and he always wanted to see the B'nai Menashe, right? He wanted to see the Jews of India and also the Jews of Kaifeng, China, right? People, if you don't realize that, ladies and gentlemen, over 100 different nations. That's when God told Isaiah, the 4 corners of the earth, that's exactly what's going on, right? So he said he really wanted to, we were at the Knesset, we were leaving, and he was getting more and more oh, that's what it was. I'm sorry, Daniel, tell the story. We were in the Knesset, and one of the young staffers was with us, greeted us in the room, and he talked to us and everything. So my Chinese pastor friend, asked this young staffer about the B'nai Menashe. Well, this particular staffer didn't really know about the community, right? They didn't. So he goes, I didn't know what you meant. I don't know what you mean. He said, well, yeah, no, the B'nai Menashe, it's a big thing. So yeah, well, again, not ascribing anything negative to the young man. He didn't know. He didn't really know. He couldn't really speak to it. So my Chinese pastor friend, he got a little discouraged, right? He's like, oh no. So as we were leaving the Knesset, oh, Pastor Dumisani, I wanted to hear more about such. And sure enough, here comes a bus of school kids driving up for their field trip, right? Israeli school kids. They get off the bus, and several of them are actually speaking the dialect of Mandarin that this pastor speaks. He sees them, hears them, goes and have a conversation with them, and sure enough, these kids are they made Aliyah from China. He came in, Pastor Dumisani. He was so excited. I met the Jews. I said, that's amazing. That's amazing. It was amazing. Almost like, God, you did it just for him, right? Because he was discouraged. And when I told him that, I said, you know what? He's a young staffer. They may not know everything that's going on. It's a tiny country, but it's a big country, right? So you may not know, but don't get discouraged. Yes, there's plenty of Jews of Asian descent who came from India, who came from Burma, who came from, right? So just so happens on that very same day, he met him. He was beaming the whole time. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the whole identity thing. He already loved Israel. It's not like he needed to see someone who looked like him to love Israel. No. But when that happened, it was a powerful moment for him. So he stood there, had a conversation in that dialect with those young people. And he's like going, who are they? First of all, maybe they're just tourists. No, they went to whatever school and there's their day to go to the Knesset. I've seen those types of things happen. That is indescribable, as you know, Dan. You have to be there. No one can just tell you about that. You have to actually be in the land. My hope is that those pastors and leaders will experience the land, the food. I'm a foodie. Oh my God. I go to my favorite one is the Jerusalem Grill. Shout out there at the Machneu and the Mark. I love to eat the food. Oh my God. Right. So that all of that things, and those all amazing things, but the people that they really connect with the land and meet the people. Including the Arab Christian population, the Arab Muslim population. Israel has all of it, right? Meet them, meet the Druze, I want you to meet them and talk to them. Sometimes the stories are kind of difficult. Hey, some of my life can be kind of difficult at times, and the other, but I'm talking about the whole thing. Israel's story is so powerful. If you can just get somebody to the land, I'm going to say this last thing, Daniel. I'm sorry, I'm a big mouth. You can stop posting me. See, he talks too much. Are there difficulties and challenges? Yeah. I've had people, it's always the minorities, smaller group, but who come there and they didn't have as much fun. Yeah, I went there and that IDF or that police officer was kind of mean to me and I felt this, that, I felt that. And I mean, it might be a legit thing. I was kind of disrespected in this way. And, you know, because people are people, right? I love the way one of my guides said it before. He was talking about saying, so whenever you're going to certain places, watch your purses. And he said, you know, be careful your security. He said, this is the Holy Land. He said, but not everyone is holy. I don't laugh. I said, it's a good point, right? He's like going, yeah, you're in the Holy Land, but you know, you got to watch out for folks who might pick your pocket, all that kind of stuff, who might have an attitude, because they're people, they're regular people. Those things happen. And I've heard some difficult conversations around people who had some not so great experiences, at least one or two things that happened, but overwhelmingly over the 20 something times I've been there, maybe 30 at this point, 93, 94% in terms of the people I brought there, lives changed forever. Lives changed forever. Now my last story. There's a young man that we brought with us years ago. We did a music thing. We did a little music tour and everything. One of them was one of our friends, musicians from California that came with us. Blown away. He and his wife just had an amazing time. And this was shortly before, maybe about 3 years before October 7th. One of those two, one of the flashpoints there. And then he called my son while all that stuff was going on, the media and the Jews and the other. And he said, I want to thank you for the opportunity to go and be there. He said, because if I hadn't seen it myself, I might be believing all the stuff that's being said. So he said, so I'm hearing all the reports and the Israelis and they blah, 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 like Candace Owens. Oh, they kill the Gentiles and make matzah out of their blood. All that. Yeah, I'm hearing all the demonization of this place that I actually went to. And he said, if I hadn't gone, I wouldn't know that these were lies if I hadn't actually gone and talked and been in the land myself, because what they're describing is nothing like I actually experienced. And he said, thank you for taking me. So that's my hope, Daniel, that when we go with this 500 deep, these folks from Kenya, from Ghana, from Dallas, from Chicago, from all over. Yeah, my hope, particularly for those who've never gone before, that they come away having connected to the land and to the people.
Pastor Dumisani, this has been, as always, a very inspiring conversation for me. Thank you for spending the time. And I appreciate you specifically because you have a backbone. You speak with moral clarity. You don't get swayed left or right. And I appreciate that. How can people find you, your organization? I know you mentioned a few times in the interview, but let's give it to them one more time, and then we'll sign off.
Yes, sir. So IBSI.org is our organization, the original Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, IBSI.org. If you want to know more about the Black Christian Leadership Council on Israel Relations and the Unfinished Business Holy Land Tour that's coming up, and if you want to be a part of that, you go to bclcir.org, bclcir.org. BCLCIR.org. You'll see all the information about the tour. If you want to be a part of that, if you are African-American pastor and leader, and I haven't mentioned this part, Daniel, 50 plus rabbis will be with us as well, right? There'll be rabbis and pastors together in the land. So we're helping organize both of those things. Shout out to Rabbi Josh Stanton of the Jewish Federation, and my Nolan Leibowitz out there, Valley Beth Shalom, and then the other ones. And shout out to Rabbi Mark Bloom there in Oakland, California. It's like I'm on a radio station, right? I'm giving out some call outs and everything. But we're excited about that because, again, the land and the people, those pastors and leaders will be connected with other rabbis and Jewish leaders from their communities, because it's not a one-off, ladies and gentlemen. They will go back to their cities, having experienced that together, and continue on that synergy that we know is already powerful, but we're looking forward to doing that. So yeah, BCLCIR.org. You can find out more about that. And you can support either one of those organizations. They're separate. I want to say our original organization still exists. We're still doing, that's why I'm so tired now, because we're doing both of those things. But each of the council members that I mentioned to you, they all have their own ministries, churches, and all those things. None of us stopped any of those things, right? We just felt God give us strength to do this as well. So we're doing the council together, but we are continuing in our individual ministries and organizations as well.
Thank you, Pastor Dumisani. God bless you, and wishing you the best of success in the future, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me.